The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks out there in Staffordshire. It's been a long time since I've been in this county. We're beginning a new district of it this week, and you can see behind me the sort of thing you're going to see all week long. This is the Staffordshire Moorlands, one of the most beautiful parts of this country, hands down in my opinion. I'm beginning in a very small village that's got plenty of this scenery. This is Hollinsclough. Hollinsclough, Howell's Ravine. Hello everyone out there in Staffordshire. It's been a bit of a while again, but I'm back for another go in your beautiful county this week. We're beginning a new district too, Staffordshire Moorlands, a vast open area of wonderful countryside with a collection of villages that wouldn't look out of place in the Derbyshire Dales or High Peak. We know what they all look like, right? The Staffordshire Moorlands have plenty for us to get our teeth into, and we're beginning proceedings with a tiny one called Hollinsclough. Lying within the boundaries of the Peak District, Hollinsclough is on the upper reaches of the River Dove, which forms the Staffordshire-Derbyshire border. Just over the border is Buxton, where most of the village's residents go for their main shops. Hollinsclough is at one end of a level area between the Dove and the River Manifold, not far from both of their sources on the eastern side of Axe Edge Moor. Not far downstream from Hollinsclough, the Dove enters the limestone valley that ends in the famous Dove Dale. There can be no question that this one's main selling point would be the views you get from the top of the ridge on which it lies. As such, if you come out here on a weekend, you're bound to see lots of tourists. I'm talking cyclists and walkers mainly, the sort of thing we're used to seeing in the Dales. Hollinsclough village doesn't have a lot for them, but there are some nice parts to it. There's a Methodist chapel, a primary school and a chapel hall, but the nearest shops or pubs are 2 miles away in the neighbouring village of Longnor. That said, this is still a great way to start the moorlands, so let's hop in the car and then go for a walk, and let's put Hollinsclough on the map. Let's kick off this episode with a drive into Hollinsclough village using Edgetop Road. I've tried to do this drive as slowly as possible where traffic allowed me to. That's because from this vantage point up here in the hills to the west of the village, you get some absolutely amazing views into the Staffordshire Moorlands and the Derbyshire Dales. This is the road that links the much larger village of Longnor to the south of Hollinsclough to the A53, the main road between Leek and Buxton. Hollinsclough itself is not on this road. It's on a minor road slightly to the north, which until the 19th century was the one that provided that link instead. This new road was laid out in 1843 and 1844. Edgetop is a great example of what transport experts would call a ridge road. It literally runs along the top of a ridge. There are very few buildings out here, due to the gradients mainly. The Hollinsclough area is a site of geological interest, being on the fringe of the White Peak limestone and the Staffordshire Moorland gritstone. It's surrounded by some strangely shaped hills. They're known as reef knolls, formed millions of years ago when this area was beneath the sea. Crome Hill is perhaps the most famous, just over the Derbyshire border. It's known as the Sleeping Giant, and although it's worth exploring for the far-reaching views it provides, there are some dangerous drops walkers have to avoid. Crome Hill is also reputedly haunted. In the book Highways and Byways of Derbyshire, written by Nellie Erickson in 1908, it states that Crome Hill had the Devil's House and Parlour. It's said it was there where once the Prince of Darkness tried to hang himself but bungled it and came to life again. Supposedly, he now haunts the hill from midnight to daybreak. On a different note, industry was once thriving out here. Hollinsclough has seen all manner of trade and commerce stretching back to at least the mid-16th century. Its position on the River Dove made it desirable for mills. For example, there was a fulling mill on the Dove above Hollinsclough village by at least 1564. Cloth working in that area is suggested by the name Tenter or Tender Hill, used by 1775 for the hill between the river and an area known as Golling Gate. Tender Hill is a junction of stony tracks and ancient paths. Hundreds of years ago, jaggermen and their strings of pack horses, sometimes as many as 70 in a team, wound their way down the hillside. They would be laden with salt from the salt pans of Cheshire, looking to cross the river to get to Bakewell. Local sheep would have been dipped in the river at that point too. That's how the bridge that crosses the Dove at Tender Hill gets its name. It's called Washgate Bridge and has a beautiful curve of stones, some 21 feet long. There were hawkers and peddlers here too. In fact, Edgetop Farmhouse is worth a mention. It's one of Hollinsclough's listed buildings, dating from 1787. It was built for the hawker Micah Mellor. John Lomas, the son of a peddler, George Lomas, lived at Coleshaw in the late 1740s. In 1764 he became a hawker on his own account and later a wholesale dealer. Lomas was quite a famous man actually. In 1785 he appeared before the House of Commons to argue against a proposal to abolish licensed hawkers and peddlers. He won too. Being a peddler was a respectable occupation. Lomas dealt in what was known as Manchester goods, such as clothing, but his main job was transporting silk to the mills in Macclesfield. There were an array of other tradesmen here. Isaac Coates, possibly of Coatestown on Hollinsclough Moor, was a dealer and chapman from the late 1750s. At first he bought goods from travellers, but in around 1770 he started to buy directly from manufacturers in Manchester and employed 2 or 3 men to sell for him. Hollinsclough had button merchants too. William Wood was one of them. He lived in the village in the mid-1700s. Ezekiel Wood was known to have been a button maker in 1764. Arguably the most famous former tradesman to the village's name was John Gaunt, another button merchant. He was known locally in 1772 as the King of the Flash. Several women of Hollinsclough were button makers too. Both men and women worked as silk weavers during the same period. 4 were recorded in 1841, 37 in 1851 and 13 in 1861. All of this meant roads across this open countryside were very important. Hollinsclough button makers and silk weavers needed a way to transport their goods to larger towns. These roads would have transported the buttons to Manchester and the silk to Macclesfield, where there were an array of silk mills. All of that would have been done by pack horse. There are no pack horses on these roads now, only cars, and usually they belong to tourists. Today, Hollinsclough is a popular departure point for walkers visiting the surrounding countryside. And Hollinsclough is a great little place for a wander, mainly because of its topography. Its name is literally a reference to the lie of the land. Hollinsclough means Howell's Ravine. It used to be a pretty populous village thanks to all the various trades and industries it once had. The 1851 census listed 211 males and 189 females, for a total of exactly 400. Like many other villages dependent upon hill farming around here now though, the population has declined rapidly since then. That doesn't mean it should be overlooked. Let's go and see it. Well, let me tell you folks, coming into Hollinsclough using that narrow road is really, really difficult. You have to concentrate so much on the road in front of you, you can't really appreciate all this fantastic scenery. I could see it out of the corner of my eye, but I couldn't really look at it because I was concentrating too much on where I was going. Luckily I didn't meet anything coming down into the village. That would have been interesting if I had, because there was no passing places. Anyway, we are in Hollinsclough village, so let's take a little walk through this. And when I say little walk, I mean little walk. We won't be here very long. These first 3 landmarks are all linked to each other, and this was a bit confusing to understand. We begin this walk at the old schoolhouse at the eastern end of Hollinsclough village. This is Hollinsclough's original school, which opened in 1789. The village has had 2 others since then, and they're both on the other side of the road, literally just a few paces away. Here's the school which would replace that first one in the 19th century, but this is also a former church too. This is where things start to get a little muddled depending on what source you read. There are some conflicting stories, but this is what I understood. From the 17th century and presumably earlier, Hollinsclough people attended church at Longnor because there was no church here. In 1840, Sir George Crewe, prompted by the curate of Longnor, William Buckwell, rebuilt a derelict barn in Hollinsclough to be used as both a church and a school. This building is the result. It was licensed in 1841 and was dedicated to St Agnes in 1906. From 1850, the church was served by the curate of Quornford, who lived in Hollinsclough at the vicarage. St Agnes's church was therefore to be a chapel of ease, seeing as Hollinsclough was in the parish of Quornford at the time. Regular religious services were last held here in 1956 and the church was closed altogether in 1966. Although it's been abandoned as far as worship goes, it still had a use until 2018. Let's not forget, this was also a school, St Agnes C of E. As you can see, the building is topped with an impressive dovecote, which also served as a bell tower. The bell would have resounded around the valley, summoning the local children to their school. When the building closed in the 1960s, the children didn't have to move far, as we'll see in a moment. This became a residential field study centre in 1974. It was called the Weldon Centre, or alternatively, the Michael Hutchinson Residential Centre or Hollinsclough Bunkhouse. It was used by the Frank Weldon School in Carlton near Nottingham as an outward bound centre, basically a field centre where their children came for residential trips and such like. It continued in that way until relatively recently, but internal flooding in 2018 made the building uninhabitable. Thankfully though, this lovely old building is still standing. Crown reduction to a large tree was undertaken in 2019 and assorted works to ensure that it remained weatherproof and structurally stable were carried out in 2021. The building was sold by auction in March 2023 and as far as I understand it, the new owner is looking to convert it for use as a family dwelling. Well, just imagine as a kid going to school here, surrounded by all this beautiful scenery out here in Hollinsclough. Well, children still do go to school here, except they don't go to that building anymore. They go to the school that's currently behind this. Let's show you where that is. Right there, that's Hollinsclough Academy. And so here's where the children from St Agnes C of E School would move to in 1960. This newer building was opened just behind the old church and school to accommodate them all. The school achieved grant-maintained status during the early 1990s when the government of the day offered that opportunity to all schools across the country. It became Hollinsclough Church of England Voluntary Aided Primary School on the 1st of September 1999. That status gave the school its continued independence from most of the mainstream system. It also helped to keep the school open when pupil numbers fell to just 5 in 2009. Hollinsclough is now proud to be part of the Moorlands Primary Federation of Schools. The Methodist Chapel next. This was built in 1801 by John Lomas, the same man who successfully argued his hawker and peddler case in the House of Commons. The chapel stands in what was the garden of Lomas's home. He built it at a cost of £355 and his initials can be seen on the date stone above the door. John Lomas made an absolute fortune by transporting and hawking goods made in Manchester and Macclesfield around the countryside. He was so successful that he later set on several employees to help him. His company still exists, and today we know them as the haulage contractor Lomas Distribution. Now, he originally lived in Flash and was a staunch churchgoer. However, one winter's night in 1783, he was persuaded by his wife to hear preaching at a nearby chapel. That converted him to Methodism, and he was so inspired that he built this chapel as a result. Today, the mortal remains of the man himself are buried beneath this chapel that he built in a vault. Hollinsclough is the only chapel still open in the former Wetton and Longnor Methodist Circuit, and celebrated its bicentenary at Easter 2001. Okay, so the area in front of the chapel here is where the two main roads through Hollinsclough meet. And there's a nice little triangle of grass there with a bench on it. I imagine plenty of people have sat on that bench in their time and just listened to the tranquility around here, because you can't really hear much apart from birds in the trees. In this direction there's a phone box. We'll go up there in just a second. And here we've got a wall with some stones on it, which we will have a little look at. So over here there's one for the Golden Jubilee in 2002, there's one for the Diamond Jubilee in 2012, there's one for the Platinum Jubilee in 2022, and then this one is to do with the coronation of King Charles and Queen Camilla in 2023 with the King Charles cipher right there. Now these stones and this wall stand in front of our last landmark here in Hollinsclough, and that would be this building here. Now, related to the chapel is the last building to see in Hollinsclough. Yes, we're at the end already. This is the chapel hall, which becomes a lively tea room at weekends and bank holidays. It plays host to an active and friendly community life, including the monthly meetings of the local history group and a local charity called the Hollinsclough Action Group. So for the benefit of the new viewers out there, because I'm sure there will be some here in the Staffordshire Moorlands for the first time, what I've just done there is I've left a card on the parish notice board. It's my way of marking off that I've been to a place. So that's one down and 41 to go here in the Staffordshire Moorlands. Let's move on to number 2. Alright, that's been a great way to kick off the Staffordshire Moorlands. There's 41 more of these to come, so if you enjoyed this one, you'll likely want to stick around for more. Well, I'm here all week. Tomorrow we're off down the road to the largest village in this northeastern corner of the Moorlands, where there's lots more to cover. Hello folks, welcome back to the Staffordshire Moorlands for round number 2. Now I'm beginning this episode in a bush shelter which is made of stone, and so it's been here for quite a long time. It does have a few modern additions, including a board here which is electronic and it tells you departure times towards Buxton, as you can see there. Also within this shelter there are some lovely little drawings, paintings, bits of artwork, as you can see, adorning the walls. They're quite nice, aren't they? And in the middle of them all is this. And this depicts the marketplace here in this village. This is the village and the parish of Longnor. Longnor, Longridge. Today, back in Staffordshire Moorlands, we come to the village of Longnor, again within the boundaries of the Peak District National Park. Longnor as a settlement dates from early times, and the first recorded church here was built in the Middle Ages. Records of the village's early history have been lost, but there is evidence of activity in the area from around 700 AD. Longnor should not be confused with another village of the same name near Shrewsbury, but to help us out, there's the Domesday Book. The village was named Longnor in that document, and it basically means Long Ridge. The Shrewsbury version was recorded as Leg. Longnor lies on the northern bank of the River Manifold, on a limestone ridge between that and the River Dove. West of Longnor are the expansive Staffordshire Moorlands, with the summit at Axe Edge Moor towards the north and Norwich further south. North and east of Longnor is the White Peak, with the Dove flowing through a steep-sided limestone valley. According to local legend, the village was burned during the reign of William II as a punishment for the poaching of deer from the forests around Leek. The village centre is at the intersection of two historically important roads which led to Buxton, Bakewell, Leek and Macclesfield. This meant it was able to become a significant market town in the 18th century. It still is today one of the more significant villages in this corner of northern Staffordshire. It has chapels, schools, pubs, shops and so much more besides. Let's have a wander and put Longnor on the Staffordshire map. Shrewsbury can wait its turn. As the principal village in this corner of northern Staffordshire, the most logical place to start our walk around Longnor is right in the centre of the village. Our first landmark is a pub. This is the former Crewe and Harper Arms Hotel, a historic coaching inn that's been serving travellers for almost 200 years. The inn was originally built in the late 18th or early 19th century. Its age reflects Longnor's history as a bustling stop for stagecoaches, which came through the village between Manchester and London primarily. Leek, Macclesfield, Bakewell and Buxton were all important towns in those days too, and Longnor sat right in the middle of them all. It quickly became an important market town. The Crewe and Harper retained some of its original features, including a stone archway that once led to the stable yard. It takes its name from the Harper Crewe family. They owned Derbyshire's Colcabby, but they also had connections to Longnor, with some members holding positions at this very inn. While no longer a pub, the building is still in use. It's been converted into self-catering holiday accommodation today. It was one of 5 pubs Longnor once had to its name. Yes, so this is the marketplace and it seems to be the main place to park here in Longnor if you visit. It's not where I've chosen to park though, but most people do. As you can see, it's cobbled. It's cobbled. We don't see much of this, do we? But I imagine in little market towns like this, we'll see this more and more. Now, there are loads of things around this marketplace. We've seen, obviously, the pub, or what used to be the pub. There's a few other bits and bobs to cover, including the market hall. So here we are in the marketplace, and all around you are historical buildings and features, including a market hall, a church and a former blacksmith's premises. The first written record of Longnor tells us that St Bartholomew's Church was founded in 1223 on the site of the present 18th century parish church, and from there things grew. Over the next 2 centuries there were around 20 homes constructed in the village, growing up around the central crossroads and the marketplace. By 1787, Longnor's name was shown on a map of Staffordshire in capital letters. At that time, settlements written like that were seen as very significant. It remained an important centre for trade until the 19th century, and the village still gives you the impression that it could be a small market town again very easily. In the Middle Ages, the market, which in 1293 was claimed by the lords of the manor of Alstonfield, was held close to the church. Regular fairs, up to 4 per year, were held here from the later Middle Ages. A Tuesday market was granted to John Harper in 1595. Records show there were always a variety of trades and crafts represented in the village, ranging from umbrella makers and clothes peg makers to drapers, grocers and quarry workers. By 1817 there was a market house, although it's not clear when it was built originally. It was rebuilt at the expense of Sir John Harper Crewe in 1873, and this is it right here. It was converted to a parish hall in 1931 and was later to be occupied by Longnor Craft Centre and a coffee shop. It still retains an inscription above the entrance giving the former market toll tariffs. Longnor's ambition to be a thriving market town into the modern era was hindered somewhat by the demise of the turnpikes and its lack of a railway link. The market may be gone, but the small, characterful cobbled market square and Victorian market hall are reminders of how life used to be. Longnor used to have a market cross too at one time. Well, there may not be a market here in Longnor anymore, but the market hall is still the most prominent and iconic feature in the centre of the village. Now, there are other things to see. It's not just all about what you've just seen there in the market square. There's loads more. So let's head along the high street now and I'll take you towards the post office, which you can see on the left hand side just there. Along the high street now we come to the post office. Even though it's no longer a market town, Longnor still has a number of shops and amenities, and this is proud to be one of them. As well as the post office, the village has a general store, a coffee shop and a chip shop as well. Let's also not forget the craft centre too. I guess that has to count as well. Next door to the post office is the Old Cheshire Cheese, another of Longnor's pubs. This one is very much still open, serving fine ales, snacks and excellent meals. The history of the inn begins in 1621 when the original building was constructed as a small farmstead which was added to later. It is one of the oldest remaining buildings in Longnor today. The High Street is an old turnpike road and packhorse route, and that gives this inn its name. It was able to obtain and supply Cheshire cheese en route to markets in Derbyshire and Yorkshire. Now we've got a circular amble around the eastern end of the village. This is generally residential and it will end when we reach the church, just to the north of the marketplace. This area gives us an opportunity to appreciate the beauty that the Staffordshire Moorlands villages have. In fact, Longnor has been admired for quite some time. The village formed the basis of two paintings by L.S. Lowry. One was simply entitled Longnor and the other was called the Village Square. He painted the latter in 1943 and today it's in Glasgow. Longnor has also been a filming location for various things, and you can see why. Some of the TV series Peak Practice was filmed here for starters. Episode 5 of the BBC's 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice also used Longnor. Several shots of the village were used to depict the fictitious settlement of Lambton in Derbyshire. And people often come to Longnor for recreational or sporting reasons. It holds the annual Longnor Sports or Wakes races on the first Thursday after the first Sunday each September. Well, the sun's come out now and it's made Longnor look fantastic, hasn't it? That little amble through those residential areas was absolutely stunning. Doesn't take much to make you fall in love with the place, and I think the sun's done that here. Now, next on our list, as we mentioned earlier, is the church, and you can see it just peeking out there from above that house. Let's head over there and check that out next. Religiously, Longnor was a chapelry of Alstonfield and became a separate ecclesiastical parish in 1902. The first mention of a church here was back in 1223, and there was another in 1448. The present church building dates from 1780 and it stands just to the north of the one built in 1448. Historians reckon the current building, dedicated to St Bartholomew, stands on the 1223 church site. The building is of a rectangular shape with rounded Georgian windows to provide light, originally for two galleries. The font is Norman and was for some time placed in the churchyard. It has an embattled western tower with pinnacles and appears rather substantial. On the whole though, it is a rather grim looking building. That's really the only downside it has. Among its best features is a modern sculpture of St Bertram by the sculptor Harry Everington. Its churchyard contains the grave too of William Billings. He was somewhat of a war hero. He was born in a local cornfield, saw the capture of Gibraltar and suffered wounds at the Battle of Ramillies. He later saw action against the Stuarts in both 1715 and 1745 and finally expired at the grand old age of 112 years. That's a fair old innings for a boy who liked a battle or two. Down Chapel Street we go now, which is cobbled, just like the market square. This is probably one of the oldest streets in Longnor, judging by its width and character. There used to be another pub down here. It was called the Red Bull, and no, it didn't have any links to the well-known energy drink company. Today it's an art gallery. The Red Bull was formerly known as the Bull's Head and has a history that predates its listing in 1818. The pub's licence expired at some point between 1904 and 1908. The building itself is thought to date back to 1621, which would make sense given the well-preserved 17th century cottages which you can see otherwise along Chapel Street. And of course it's no longer a pub anymore, but you can still get inside this building if you know what you're doing, because as you can see it's now an Airbnb. What a lovely place for an Airbnb, out onto this cobbled street. I love streets like this. Tight, narrow, obviously never designed for cars. I'm kind of wondering how that car got down here, quite frankly, because it's a set of steps up there. Must have come in this way from the marketplace, which is just down there. We're going to go the other way. We're not heading that way. We're heading between these two buildings. It's very quiet here, by the way. Between these two buildings, and this will take us to the chapel, which is just there. Next we have the Methodist Chapel. Built in 1780, this is one of the oldest in the area. John Wesley once preached at Longnor whilst passing through on a journey from Sheffield. However, Methodist preachers had established a society at least 11 years before that in 1769. By 1784, the Longnor Methodist Society had an impressive 42 members. In 1870, a new society was created, which was named the Wetton and Longnor Methodist Circuit. The manse was built at Wetton along with a new chapel building. The importance of Longnor was also recognised though. The original Wetton and Longnor circuit had been Wesleyan, and in 1932 it took on some of the primitive Methodist chapels in the area. This chapel closed in 1996, but some of the former members continued to meet for a while in a hired hall because the journey to Buxton's Methodist Church wasn't seen as very practical. A shop known as Airs and Graces, which is a doll's hospital, is now housed in the former chapel, which contains much of its original furniture, including its flying pulpit, choir stalls and pews. Incidentally, adding to religious history and nonconformism in particular, there was once a Quaker meeting house at Longnor, which was registered in 1723. We have another residential area to catch now as we head up Lanehead towards the northern end of the village. I'd describe this narrow lane as a bit more modern. See you again in a sec. So what that little walk up Lanehead has done has brought us to the very northern part of Longnor, if you like. The road here goes north towards Hollinsclough, but we're heading south because we've seen Hollinsclough, haven't we? Now, there's a few more landmarks left, and mostly they're all on the right-hand side of this road. The first one is just there, that little opening there. That's a fire station. Now we're on Buxton Road and we're heading back south again. Next to pass is the fire station, which is not something you'd expect to see out here, but its importance can't be denied. Longnor Community Fire Station is what's known as retained and forms a vital part of the wider Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Services. Retained fire stations rely on firefighters who are not full-time but are available to respond to calls when needed. Its main function is to provide fire and rescue services to the Longnor area. Now we're at St Bartholomew's School. Education has a long tradition in Longnor. Legend has it that the first schoolmaster in the village in 1597 was paid in corn. How about that for a wage? A school was known to have been in existence in the mid-18th century, and in 1799 it was located within the former Methodist chapel. Education was endowed under various charities back then. A national school would eclipse them all. It was built in 1853 and later became the present Church of England Primary School, which we're outside right here. The school celebrated its 150th anniversary in 2022 with events showcasing its history and community involvement. This involved a special exhibition. This street is called Carder Green and it connects Buxton Road to Leek Road. There's not a lot on it, but we wouldn't be down here if there wasn't something. This is Massey Feeds. Massey Feeds started as Edward Massey and Sons and traded from a mill in Holmes Chapel in 1878. The company was founded by Edward Massey, who had 4 sons, Harry, Edward, Tom and John. On the death of Edward Sr. in 1883, it became Massey Brothers. The company ground grain on old millstones and sold it to local farmers as animal feed. Grinding was soon replaced by a disintegrator in 1933. It does the same job, it grinds the grain and is an integral part of the modern day process. In 1944, the business acquired William Luce & Co. of Stockport as the company started to grow. Soon they bought another business, Thomas Belfield's, which was based in Derbyshire. The site of this, the store in Longnor, was where Thomas Belfield operated. It was rented until 1971 when it was bought from the brewers Ind Coop. This gave the site a very unique license to sell beer by the case, and the store is still used today. That means if you call in here, you can buy both animal feed and alcohol. How's that for unique? In June 1992, Massey celebrated the sale of the 1 millionth tonne of feed processed, and they're currently well on the way to surpassing the 3 million tonne mark. It's a Longnor institution. Okay, so Carder Green has brought us onto our last little street here, which will connect us back to the marketplace. It's quite an interesting little area, this. I've just been having a little look around as I've been filming Massey Feeds there, and yeah, nice open space here as it becomes Gall Edge Lane. It's almost like a secondary marketplace. I know it's not, but it's kind of similar. Some nice houses that way. Now, in this direction, there's a couple of buildings here which caught my eye. This one on the end is called Old Smithy Cottage, and the reason that's called Old Smithy Cottage is because right next door there is a blacksmith's shop, and it looks like it's still going actually. You see here, this is the blacksmith shop with the door open. Fantastic. Now next door to that is our last landmark here in Longnor. Just come out of the way of this lorry. There we go. Now you might be able to buy alcohol at Massey Feeds, but you certainly can't get a pint in this place anymore. This is the Horseshoe Inn, and you might recognise this if you're a bit of a telly addict. Our last landmark on the walk is the Horseshoe Inn, which is located diagonally opposite the Crewe and Harper Arms on the other side of the marketplace. This is the oldest of the former pubs in Longnor, dating back to the late 15th or early 16th century. Its facade gave it a bit of fame in the 1990s. You'll recall earlier we mentioned peak practice. This was used as the exterior of the fictional pub The Black Swan in that programme. Like the Crewe and Harper, it still has its sign, but closed a while ago and was converted into a residence. It had some long-term operators. Shoemaker John Ball ran it for over 20 years until the 1880s. William Findlow, already a beer retailer in Longnor, took over for the next 3 decades or more. And so that's that for Longnor, but we will be coming back to this village again later this week. There's a reason for that. You see, the parish of Longnor doesn't cover everything it's known for. Out here, boundaries follow the course of rivers or other natural features, meaning some of Longnor is within other areas. Come back soon and we'll check all those out too. Welcome back to the Staffordshire Moorlands again, everybody. Now, in the Hollinsclough episode 2 days ago, I did make a mention of how beautiful this particular part of the country is. I think I've got proof here. I'm leant on a gate and this is my view. And let me tell you that coming down the road that this gate is on, you get an even better view of the countryside out here. And if you live in this place, you have this all the time. That beautiful view every single day. And that is how lucky the people must be here in Sheen. Sheen at the shelters. Today on TVI we continue through the Staffordshire Moorlands, and now things are going to start to get even more rural, if that's actually possible. We're in the parish of Sheen today, which simply means at the shelters, and out here the shelters that likely refers to would be those once used by herdsmen. Sheen is a small village laid out along one dead straight road which sits on the expansive Sheen Moor. The parish is bounded by the River Dove to the east and the River Manifold to the west, whilst the village is at the southern end of a ridge running northwest to southeast. Sheen as a village doesn't have much, but with a population of less than 300 people, I guess it doesn't need as much as Longnor did. There is still a church and a village hall though, and a pub called the Staffordshire Knot. We'll be checking those all out, as well as an old chapel and a reading room, also to be found on the main street. South of Sheen is an engineering business called Altrad Bell. The face of the country here is wild and romantic. It really is the epitome of what the Staffordshire Moorlands is all about. The area has been inhabited for several centuries. Near Brund, which is a hamlet that also falls within Sheen's boundaries, there are 3 Bronze Age bowl barrows. Excavations in the 19th century found human cremations and flint and bronze artefacts at Brund Low, Rye Low and Town End. To the southeast of it all is a notable house called Beresford Manor. The Beresford name will crop up a few times in this episode because the family were major landowners out here. Let's get going and shine our light on Sheen. We start at the northern end of the village at St Luke's Church. Religiously, out here on the Staffordshire Moorlands, there are churches and chapels seemingly everywhere. They're randomly dotted around the countryside, or at least that's how some of them appear to be. There was a chapel at Sheen by 1185, and back then it would have been pretty isolated. The present church of St Luke, which is presumably on the same site as that chapel, is a Grade 2 listed building. Its origins are 14th century. It was mostly rebuilt between 1828 and 1832 using stone from Sheen Hill, the highest point in the parish at 380 metres above sea level. It was rebuilt again just 20 years later, reusing the stone from its predecessor. The new church was designed by C.W. Burley and William Butterfield, and it was consecrated in 1852. As we know from loads of previous videos, Butterfield's work is exceptional. His craftsmanship gives Sheen a level of architectural quality and sophistication that's usually unexpected in a tiny village. The focal point of St Luke's Church is the chancel, which is made of stone and is carved and ribbed, forming a barrel-shaped vaulting. It's possible, but not known for sure, that Butterfield designed the tomb in the churchyard for members of the Critchlow family. Note the leafy nature of this churchyard, by the way. Trees are scattered throughout the village and they contribute significantly in certain locations. There are substantial groups of trees around the churchyard and in front of both the old vicarage and the current vicarage. This northern area is the most wooded part of Sheen. Moving south along Pound Street, we next come to the village cross. Now, try as I might to work out what this one was for, my efforts turned up very little. It's clearly not the original cross. The cross dates from the 15th century, but only the top stone of the current base appears to be old. The shaft, the head, and the rest of the base are far newer. I would imagine this is used as a war memorial now, but it clearly had some other purpose a long time ago. By the way, this should not be confused with the Knowsley cross, that's something else. Also within Sheen's boundaries, it's an ancient wayside cross which is a ways north of the village. It too is 15th century. Could the two crosses have been linked in some way? Behind that cross is the village hall. This used to be a school and it was built in 1851 with an attached house on some former glebe land due south of the church. Like the church, this was designed and built by Butterfield, although the original architect was Burley. As you can probably tell, Butterfield's work is clearly more visible. Butterfield also had a large hand in the old vicarage and a former coach house nearby, which was later converted into the current vicarage. Now, much as I would have liked to have parked in this car park, because to be fair it's quite a narrow road through Sheen, I can't actually do that because it's a private car park, this, for users of the hall and for the schoolhouse and for the church. And even though I'm visiting those three things, I'm not actually using them, am I? So I chose to park out on the road. Should be okay where I am though. I'm only going to be here for about 20 minutes because there's a combine harvester coming past. There you go. Rural machinery. It's noisy at times. Yeah, so I'm only going to be here about 20 minutes because this is basically a very simple village to walk through. It's just basically one street. And if we head out this way, I'll show you where we're going. Down here. Let's see what else is in Sheen. You'll no doubt have noticed a lot of the buildings and houses here are made of stone. Most are made of gritstone, quarried locally. Stone slate has survived on a minority of buildings, whilst clay tiles imported from the Staffordshire potteries are otherwise the predominant roofing material out here. Everything we've seen so far has been within what you would describe as the most densely populated part of the village. The northern end is a tight-knit cluster. The rest of the interesting bits here in Sheen are at the other end of the village. You can sort of imagine this as being like a dumbbell, heavy at both ends. So for a short way, there's not a lot to see, other than the beautiful countryside that is the Staffordshire Moorlands. Enjoy this for a bit, and I'll see you at the knot next. Now we come to the only pub in the village, and the only one in the parish too. This is the Staffordshire Knot, which is sometimes spelt with two T's at the end. The current name of this pub has been in existence since at least 1872, but in the mid-19th century its name was the Horseshoe, and it was run by John Woolley. He was a blacksmith, hence the name. For a short time in the 1970s, this pub was alternatively known as Yoldy Spinning Wheel, but it reverted back to being the Staffordshire Knot in 1994. The building is of various dates, but much of it is 19th century. If you look closely though, it does have a lintel dated 1666 on a part which is occupied as a cottage. Well, at least that's the information I found out about the Staffordshire Knot. It doesn't look in business, does it? Honestly, as I walked past it, I thought to myself, is this still going? Surely not. It looks like it's a pub that's closed down. It can't have been very long ago if it is closed down. The sign looks a bit forlorn, doesn't it? What do you reckon? Do you think the Staffordshire Knot's still in business? I'm not so sure. Once you get beyond the pub, you're not far from the end of Sheen, which is known by the locals as Town End. Between here and there are two buildings of note which need to be covered. One of them is this house. This was a reading room, opened in the village in 1856 and set up as a parochial lending library with a paid librarian. It was built in order to provide intellectual occupation for Sheen's residents and offered an alternative to the Staffordshire Knot as a place of recreation. It closed in 1889 due to a lack of support. I guess we can conclude from that pubs will always be more popular than libraries. What a shocker. There was a second reading room built in Sheen in 1912. That sat to the south of the village and it was made of a corrugated metal. It was sold in the early 1980s and it's now disused and derelict. Rather unusually for a rural area like this, there's no evidence in Sheen of any nonconformism on any scale until the 19th century. Sheen's Wesleyan Chapel opened in 1878 to the north of Town End. Its Sunday school extension was added in 1912. The chapel closed in 1968 and was for a time used as a workshop. Well, one way to know you're definitely up in the hills is the fact that it's so windy. Trust me, I'm walking down through the village and nearly getting blown around so much and blowing me back towards Longnor. And speaking of turning back, that's what we're doing now. We're turning around here at the old chapel and walking back towards the church and the village hall. So now that we're at the end of the village, it's time to head back from whence we came to retrieve the car. We still have a few things to cover using that. Now, one thing we won't be able to cover, neither on foot nor in the car, would be Beresford Manor. That's a listed building which sits to the southeast of Sheen on its own down a private track. In about 1850, Sir Alexander James Beresford Hope, who was commonly known by his initials AJB Hope instead, inherited the Beresford estate. That was mostly in Alstonfield, but it did extend into Sheen. He wanted to make Sheen the Athens of the moorlands, or at least that was his ambition. He did several things to the village, including rebuilding the church in 1852 at his own expense, commissioning Butterfield in the process. He also built the schoolhouse and the original reading room. It's fair to say that Hope's plans were a little too ambitious. One 19th century writer remarked that his grand plan resembled little more than an ecclesiastical colony in the wilds of Australia. That's a little harsh maybe. Sheen wouldn't look half as good as it does today had it not been for AJB Hope. And anyway, he had the last laugh, seeing as he had Beresford Manor. Beresford Manor in the southeast of the parish dates from the 17th century, although the house has some early 19th century additions. In the 18th century, it became the manor house of Sheen. Beresford Manor was never Sheen's original manor house. That honour is held by Broadmeadow Hall near the River Dove, a 17th century stone farmhouse which is also a Grade 2 listed building. It was restored in the 19th century and again in the early 1990s. There was a house at Broadmeadow by 1573 when it was acquired by the Sleigh family. During the 17th century it became the manor house of Sheen and it stayed that way until 1709 when Gervase Sleigh sold the manor to the Beresfords. Okay, so we're almost back at the car. When we reach the car, we'll be doing one last little bit of driving, which will tie together the village as a whole. There's a couple of things to see at the sort of southern end of the village, and then we need to drive through a hamlet called Brund, which is also within the parish boundaries. Just before we do that, though, I need to leave a card on the parish notice board, which is here on the left hand side as we're making our way back up towards the village hall and the cross and the church and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just hop across the road here, try and do this with one hand because I've obviously got one hand on the camera. So let's have a look. There's the parish notice board. I'll just find a card out of my wallet and we'll get this one marked off. So down the bottom here, I think, if it'll go there, which it probably will. There we are, done. Now, as you can see, this parish notice board was kindly donated by Altrad Bell. Now, who are they? Let's find out. So now we're in the car and we're heading for a business called Altrad Bell, just to the south of the village. Between the two is a small triangle of mown grass at a junction. That supports a tree planted to commemorate the wedding of Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, and Alexandra, Princess of Denmark, in 1883. A stone headstone details the event and tells you that the tree was planted and the stone was erected by the incumbent of Sheen and his parishioners. So to Altrad Bell. Originally known simply as Bell, this is a construction equipment manufacturer founded in the 1950s by Doug Blackhurst. He's the man who designed the Bell Mini Mixer after struggling to find a small portable cement mixer for his own house building project. After the success of the Mini Mixer, Bell made other things such as generators and skid steer loaders. Bell's initial production was for local tool hire shops, as tool and plant hire was gaining popularity in the construction industry. Rapid expansion followed the appointment of Ron Blackhurst as chairman in 1995. Bell's product range diversified into compacting, mixing, concreting, cutting, braking, and moving machinery. The company later expanded into other areas of construction equipment and became part of the Altrad Group in 2009, a larger international company. Today, Altrad Bell is one of the largest employers in the Staffordshire Moorlands, creating many jobs for local people. Being located in such a rural area, its presence has had a big impact on the economy of Sheen. Fun fact, by the way, 50% of Altrad Bell's employees are ex-pupils of Leek High School. To finish with, we have a drive to do through the hamlet of Brund, which is to the west of Sheen, between it and the next parish over. This is a tiny settlement, today maybe, but it was clearly occupied by ancient people groups. Evidence for that has been found by way of several barrows or burial mounds nearby. The best known is Brund Low, some 640 metres north of the hamlet. It's about 1.7 metres high and 40 metres across. Then there's Rye Low, a short distance east of Brund. That's about 1.5 metres high and about 35 metres across. Excavations at both in the past have found deposits of vegetation and insects, as well as cremated bones and flint artefacts. There's a third barrow near some buildings south of Town End. The smallest of the three, it's just under 1 metre high and 25 metres across. Cremations and flint artefacts have been found there too. Brund has also seen a lot of pack horses in its time. Ancient pack horse routes passed through Sheen and Brund at one time. One such route is now a footpath which runs west from Sheen to Brund and crosses a bridge over the River Manifold at Brund Mill. Another pack horse route branched from the first to enter Sheen by Brund Mill Bridge and continued northeast across the Dove at Pillsbury. One of, if not both of these, formed part of one of the Cheshire saltways used to export salt from that county to the Midlands and eastern England. In 1851, the local reverend by the name of Webb wrote that elderly people in Sheen could remember mule stables attached to certain farms. Their doorways were large enough to admit laden teams, which carried the salt of Cheshire. The salt trade must have been a good source of income for local people out here. And so we've driven through Brund and completed Sheen in the process. Lovely stuff. Tomorrow's episode is going to be a very unusual one. To the west of Sheen, things get very rural. Everything of note in the next one is scattered far and wide. It's basically a case of join the dots using a vehicle. Fun stuff. See you tomorrow. Hello folks, welcome back to the Staffordshire Moorlands for round 4. Now, gradually, as we've been working our way through the moorlands this week, it's got a bit more rural every single time, apart from Longnor obviously. Now this is the most rural we'll have seen as of yet. This one doesn't have a walking route because it's impossible to walk around this one, let me tell you, because it's all spread out all over the place. There are hamlets and isolated buildings and, you know, things which just basically don't form a nice neat little cluster. There are some good bits in this though, let me tell you that for free. The one we'll go to at the end of this video, the landmark at the very end of this video, is probably the most interesting. We've got to get there first though, there's lots to cover. Welcome to Fawfieldhead. Fawfieldhead, multicoloured field. Today on TVI, as we head west across the Staffordshire moorlands, we're taking on the parish of Fawfieldhead. This one is one of the most rural anywhere in the country. Fawfieldhead is scattered across the landscape here. It's by no means a village you can walk around, and there are far more animals than people that live in it. So, for the most part in this episode, we'll be driving, and we'll cover a fair few miles, navigating carefully landmark to landmark, joining the dots. Fawfieldhead consists of a collection of tiny hamlets and isolated buildings, which are all glued together via a maze of country lanes. Bang in the middle of it all is the B5053 between Longnor and Worslow. It's hard to define where the centre of Fawfieldhead is. There is a hamlet with that name, but arguably it's not the main one. Fawfieldhead's main church is actually in another hamlet called Newtown away to the west. By no means, though, is that the only church in this one. There are at least two others which sit within the expanse of moorland covered by the parish. There are pubs all over the place too, some in business and some not. The best known is probably Ye Olde Butcher's Arms at Reepsmoor. Right on the edge of the parish boundary to the west is one of the area's best known features. It's called Blakemere or Blackmere, but the locals call it the Mermaid's Pool. It's got a few tales to tell us, and it lends its name to the Mermaid Inn just up the road. This one supposedly means multicoloured field. I hope that's true, because when you do a lot of driving around, you do like to see some nice scenery. Let's check it out and see. We start our trip across Fawfieldhead at this building, Roulac Chapel, which can be found in the hamlet of Roulac or Roulach in the east of the parish. Roulac Chapel was for the Methodists, and it was built in 1849, offering them a secluded rural retreat. No longer in use for services, it's now an Airbnb. It's well used too, and why shouldn't it be? No end of people love to walk the Staffordshire moorlands, and this is probably one of the best places to base yourself. It's situated in a picturesque farming area which is still within the boundaries of the Peak District and offers some great views from its very own doorstep. As a chapel, this was built on land that was historically owned by the Shirley family. They were instrumental in bringing Methodism to Roulac. Two members in particular, Mary Shirley and her son Joseph, played a key role in establishing Methodism in the area, including the use of a room in an empty house for preaching. Roulac Farm remained in the possession of the Shirley family until 1997. John Hope Shirley was the last resident of the farm. Roulac is a very isolated settlement. It's fair to say the chapel is just about the only building of note it has. There are some farms and the odd house here and there, but that's about it. It's hard to define what lies within what hamlet out here. The next thing we're heading for isn't far from the chapel, but I don't think you can really say it's in Roulac. Using Hig Lane, we're heading for its junction with the B5053, one of the few major roads in this area. It cuts across Fawfieldhead parish, connecting Longnor with Worslow. Here's a test of your memory. Can you remember the cheese factory in Grattan when we were in the Derbyshire Dales a couple of months back? Here in Fawfieldhead, there was another one. Located on the junction, the old cheese factory is this building right here. Built around 150 years ago, it featured innovative self-turning shells for cheese storage and large vats for milk processing. The Fawfieldhead Cheese Factory was originally part of the Alstonfield Dairy Association, which later became Derbyshire Farmers. It was a cooperative effort by local farmers to produce Derby cheese. This factory was a significant part of the local agricultural landscape and was a testament to cooperative farming practices of the time. Today, of course, it's not producing cheese. It became a workshop for a company called Fox Country Furniture, which has been in business since 1983. They specialise in bespoke furniture, which they've been producing for over 36 years. If you want custom-made country furniture, this is the place to come. So in much the same way as the Staffordshire knot, which we saw yesterday in Sheen, I don't think this place is in business anymore. All the information I've just given you there about Fox Country Furniture comes from its very own website, and it does say on that website that it's open at 10 o'clock every day, but it's beyond 10 o'clock right now and it doesn't look very open to me. I wonder whether this is still trading. Well, even if it's not, it's still worth coming out into the countryside to admire the scenery, even if you're not looking for furniture. Just check this out. The cheese factory has this amazing view. That's to the east, and to the west it's not bad either. We, though, are heading in a different direction. We are now heading north to get to our next area. Now, the old cheese factory's address is often given as Reepsmoor, which kind of backs up my theory that it's not in Roulac. Again, though, it's hard to define. Then again, so is Reepsmoor. Reepsmoor, loosely, is the area that we're in now, a vast expanse of countryside between Roulac, Fawfieldhead, Newtown and Worslow. The next landmark is a pub, and it's called Ye Olde Butcher's Inn. This has been the home of the Reepsmoor Club since 1835. This is an ancient stone pub in the midst of the moorlands and not easily accessible without a car. It dates from the 1700s, so you'd imagine this has hosted many travellers on horseback. Inside, there's a mix of comfortable sofas and an area laid out for diners. It's a true free house run by a genial landlord. It's well worth a visit if you can find it yourself. The Butcher's was once owned by the Garner family, and beer was sold straight from barrels on stills at the rear of the bar via a jug. That's quite a different setup to your traditional pub. So if you step outside the front door of the pub, this is your view, and isn't this beautiful? I'm so glad the sun's up today. We've got a nice clear blue sky because you can see how beautiful the Staffordshire moorlands are. You know what? What's even better than seeing it from the pub? It's actually driving towards it, and that's where we're going. This is going to be fantastic in a moment. North we go again in the car as we head towards another religious building, again still within Reepsmoor. We're heading for the Church of St John. As churches go, this one's a bit unusual. St John's Church at Reepsmoor is one of the daughter churches to Longnor, but that's not what it was originally. Initially, it served as a workhouse for the poor before being repurposed for worship. In 1846, the building received its licence and an external staircase was added for access to the upstairs room. That was used for its services, whilst the downstairs then served as a schoolroom until its closure in 1959. That former schoolroom is now used for church and community events. Extensive renovations occurred in the 1890s and again in 2019. The Peak District National Park now own the building. It's a very peculiar church all ends up, and very characterful as a result. So that's about it for Reepsmoor, so let's head towards Fawfieldhead itself now, the hamlet that gives the whole parish its name. Now oddly, Fawfieldhead is by no means the principal settlement here. This used to be a township in the parish of Alstonfield, between the River Manifold and a small rivulet called Blake Brook. The hamlet runs for about a mile from east to west along a sunken lane that's covered in lots of places by a canopy of trees. You could perhaps count the number of houses here on one hand. Even if not, there are certainly no more than about 20. No sooner are you through Fawfieldhead than you're in another hamlet called Newtown, and that's where we'll find St Paul's Church. You want to talk about scenery? I think I've found the best bit yet. We're now in a place called Newtown, which if you come through Fawfieldhead, this is kind of where the road leads you to. There's not much in it apart from a church, but we'll see that in a second. To be fair, the church is not the main thing that I'm bothered about right now. That is. How beautiful is this? The Staffordshire Moorlands, ladies and gentlemen, they are fantastic, aren't they? I could stand here all day and look at that. We still have a few bits to cover though. So this is the lane that's brought us here. That's Fawfieldhead over there, and you can see there's like an old chapel or something there. I didn't know anything about that before I came here. Don't know whether you can just see just about see it there where my finger is. But the main building we've come to see is this one here, which is the church here in Fawfieldhead / Newtown. Just before we go to this, you can see there's a parish notice board here. I don't know how many people are going to see this, but of course we do need to leave a card on a parish notice board somewhere in Fawfieldhead, so we'll do that just now. We'll leave it just there. Hopefully someone will find that. That's Fawfieldhead in the books anyway. Let's check out this church. St Paul's Church dates from 1837 and is made of coursed stone, block and ashlar dressings. It has a blue machine tile roof. It's a single cell building which was funded by the efforts of Sir George Crewe. He raised £600 by public subscription to build the church. It's another daughter of Longnor. That's as much as is really known about this one, and so we'll move on again. This time we're heading south through another hamlet called Shawfield. We are now in an area that's really off the beaten track. Absolutely nothing is known about Shawfield's ancient history, and there's barely even a settlement up here. I say up here because we have climbed up into some hills on this trip. We are of course still very much in the Peak District. Fawfieldhead means elevated place with multicoloured open land. That's accurate. It's certainly elevated, and it's pretty too. We're about to come around Swallow Moor, where you can see the true beauty of the countryside if you stop for a while. That sounds like a plan. So by coming round Swallow Moor, we've climbed up a really steep hill. It was quite a difficult drive actually. You know what, the hardest part about it though was finding somewhere to stop because these lanes are quite narrow. Eventually though, I did find this spot right here, which is not a million miles away from our last landmark here in Fawfieldhead. I tell you what, this is some view. We're right on top of the hill here, and that's Swallow Moor you can see in front of you. You can see for miles today because obviously the sun's up, we've got a blue sky, it's beautiful. Aren't the Staffordshire Moorlands just absolutely fantastic? You know what? They have a lot to tell us in terms of scenery and how the land lies, the topography of the place, if you like, to use a fancy word. There's plenty of legends here on the moorlands as well, and that brings us to our last landmark. To finish the parish off, we have two landmarks that are right on the parish boundary. Now, if truth be told, they're both actually over the border, but they're so close it shouldn't matter much. This here is the Mermaid's Pool, a name given to a small lake by the locals. Its official name is Blakemere or Blackmere. It's a natural lake, and it's been the subject of an enduring legend that claims the water is haunted by the ghost of a mermaid, hence the Mermaid's Pool nickname. The earliest known record of the lake is from 1686, when Robert Plot wrote about it in his book The Natural History of Staffordshire. According to that text, the pond used to be much larger than its current diameter of 50 yards. An artificial trench was dug towards its eastern shore in an attempt to lower the water level. Over the centuries, the pond has been the scene of a number of drownings and a murder when, in 1679, a woman peddler was reportedly dumped in the pool by a local serial killer. So anyway, the legend of the mermaid goes like this. It tells of a beautiful young woman who rejected the advances of a local man named Joshua Linnett. Unable to accept the rejection, Joshua accused the woman of being a witch, and he managed to convince the local townsfolk to drown her in this lake. With her final breath, the young woman muttered a curse against Joshua, and 3 days later his body was found by the pool, his face covered with claw marks. The last recorded sighting of the mermaid was in the mid-19th century, when a group of locals attempted to drain the lake to see if it was bottomless, which has been claimed. Shortly after they began digging at the southern end of the pool, it's said that the mermaid appeared from the lake and threatened to flood the nearby towns of Leek and Leek Frith unless they stopped. It has since been proven, by the way, that the lake isn't bottomless. In 1958, a member of the British Sub-Aqua Club established that, at its deepest point, the pool is no more than 6 feet deep. Not far from the lake is a pub that seemingly shares the legend of the mermaid because it's called the Mermaid Inn. The Mermaid Inn is reputed to be the third highest in England. It was built by 1638 and was originally known as Blakemere House. It was an inn by 1851 and changed its name to reflect the mermaid legend. It's up to you though whether you want to believe the story of the watery woman. Alright, that's your lot for Fawfieldhead, but this trip across the moorlands isn't complete yet. We still have a lot of driving to do tomorrow in a parish that's very similar to this. We will get a walk tomorrow though. Just to the west of here is a tiny place called Upper Hume, just off the A53. I'll see you there to do it all again in 24 hours time. Hello folks, welcome back to the Staffordshire Moorlands. Now yesterday when we were at the end of the Fawfieldhead episode, there were some strong winds coming across the moorlands, and we are still very much in the hills here, so this one is going to be quite windy. Hopefully you will be able to hear what I'm saying during the course of this episode. Now I'm in a place here called Upper Hume, which has got a nice little pub, it's got a nice little stream, and it's got a nice little tale it can tell us as well. This isn't the name of this parish though, this is Heathylee. Heathylee, Heathy Wood Clearing. For the last episode this week in the Staffordshire Moorlands, we're in a place called Heathylee, except there's no village with that name here. Heathylee is an expanse of open countryside with virtually no settlement in it, barring one little corner of the parish that has half of a small hamlet. More on that in a moment. There is a really good reason though why the majority of Heathylee is so rural. Right in the middle of it, there's a huge training area that's used by the military, so it's totally off limits to any would-be settlers. To the north of that, there are more of those narrow country lanes, one of them in particular leading back to Longnor, and it takes in that part of the village we didn't cover earlier in the week. The A53 runs through the parish too, skirting its western side. On the stretch that passes through Heathylee is a building where Prince Charles Edward Stuart slept on his way through England during the Jacobite Rising in 1745. Most people travelling along the A53 will know another building, the Winking Man, which is a pub. We will get a walk around today despite all of this rurality. In the southwestern corner of it all there's a small hamlet. Named Upper Hume, only half of it sits within the boundaries. Despite that, I've opted to cover the whole thing in this video, and it's really interesting. Upper Hume has a pub called the Old Rock Inn and a huge industrial building that simply can't be missed. The best bit about the place though would be the watercourse that runs through it, splitting the place into two bits. Heathylee might be extremely rural, but it's by no means boring. Let's prove that fact right now. Let's get started with the hamlet of Upper Hume, which lies in the southwestern corner of the parish boundaries along the route of the A53. Upper Hume is only partly within Heathylee. That's because there's a stream that crosses the place, splitting it into two bits. On the Heathylee side of the boundary, there's a pub called Ye Olde Rock Inn. Simply known as the Rock Inn to many, this is a Grade 2 listed building and it was built in the late 18th century. In 1786 it was occupied by Joseph Billing, who worked at a nearby quarry. Although it's not known for sure when it became an inn, the most likely date for that is 1816. It was definitely trading by the 1820s, although at that time it was called the New Inn. It was renamed the Rock Inn after a group of businessmen likened the nearby Hen Cloud rock formation to the Rock of Gibraltar. The building predates the pub for sure though, because before being an inn, this was a house for the manager of a local silk mill. In 1985, the Burroughs family purchased the Rock and added Ye Olde to the name. It underwent a significant refurbishment in 2021, blending its historic character with modern amenities. Also on the Heathylee side of the border we have an old religious building, literally just a few yards away from that pub. This was a Sunday school and it was built in 1835. There's not a lot to go on out there about this building, but we've seen enough of these now to know what they were all about. Non-conformist congregations were pretty prevalent wherever there was industry, and as we'll see shortly, Upper Hume wasn't short of that. Upper Hume as a settlement has been here since the mid-13th century, at the very least. For hundreds of years the place has been split in half by a watercourse, and that's next to look at. This is Back or Black Brook. Its name varies depending on which source you read. It flows down off the hills to the west and ends up in the River Churnet, just to the south of the hamlet. The brook defines the western parish boundary for a way, and that fact means that only part of Upper Hume is within Heathylee. The other bit, on the other side of the stream, is not. Where it passes through Upper Hume, it forms the most delightful little fall, which is an attractive cascade of gently flowing water. Isn't it just beautiful? The brook otherwise crosses part of the road via a ford and then runs under a bridge carrying the rest of it. This brook was the key to how Upper Hume developed as a settlement. Originally, Upper Hume was known as Over Hume, and the original settlement was on the higher ground to the west of Back Brook. Originally a scattered agricultural community, the stream flowing swiftly south through it was an early site for silk manufacture. There's nothing quite like an upland stream, and to hear the rush of water is so satisfying. Now this brook is very important when it comes to Upper Hume's history. Without this, I don't think it would have developed into the settlement it is today. And the reason for that is all to do with silk. At the side of the brook is a shepherd's hut in what looks like a small garden. Where that now stands, there was a vital part of the local industry. It sits on the site of an old pump house that served a dye works that used water from the brook. Silk dyeing played a crucial role in the economy of Upper Hume and the surrounding villages. The dye works here was part of a larger silk industry that flourished in the 19th and early 20th centuries. In 1869, William Tatton purchased the silk mill at Upper Hume. He transformed it into a silk dyeing business, continuing the work of his father, Samuel Tatton. The site soon expanded, incorporating new processes such as rayon filament yarn winding and warping. By the mid-20th century, production had moved to larger premises in Leek and the dye works ceased operations. While the industry has faded, its legacy still remains in Upper Hume. Today, the old pump house stands as a nod to the past, a place once dedicated to industry, now offering a peaceful retreat in the Staffordshire moorlands. People do stay in the beautiful hand-built shepherd's hut often. It has a private hot tub and it's not far from the Roaches, which is popular with ramblers and hikers. The earliest silk mill is now disused and derelict, but there are still some mill buildings here in the centre of the village. Today we know these as Upper Hume Works. The surviving mill buildings include the original offices from 1891. In 1970, when silk production moved from Upper Hume to Leek, the mill was converted to house other industries. Today the main one is Hillcrest, an engineering company. The mill complex remains as an imposing structure at the centre of Upper Hume. Although the 19th century complex is not really of any notable architectural interest, it has local historical significance. Its industrial character and large scale contrasts with the otherwise agrarian, open character of the remainder of Upper Hume. So here's a good example of how some of these buildings have now diversified away from the production of silk. This one here is now the Peak Climbing School. You have a look at this. Peak Climbing School, rock climbing, hill walking, mountaineering training centre. And there's a little bit of information there, including the phone number. And you can even pick up a leaflet to learn about it too as well. So that's pretty much Upper Hume, but we have to make our way back to the car. Now to do that, we're heading out onto the A53 next. To complete our circuit of Upper Hume, we need to head back to the Heathylee side of the border and out onto the A53. The A53 is now a modern bypass for the hamlet. In medieval times, the main route from Leek to Buxton passed through Upper Hume. Now the hamlet is on an old loop, leaving it well out of the way of the modern traveller. It'll take you around 4 minutes to walk the stretch between the two ends of the loop. The scenery it offers is nice, but just beware, this isn't designed for walking on. There's no footpath here. So that's the main area of settlement here in Heathylee parish. The rest of the place is a wildly rural landscape. Some of it is off limits, and this is why. A lot of Heathylee parish is taken up by the Leek and Upper Hume training area. Also known as the Upper Hume Range, the MOD use it for dismounted infantry and adventurous training. It spans 2,702 acres of moorland. It's a designated site of special scientific interest and a special protection area for birds. It also contains 2 scheduled ancient monuments. Most importantly, this is a firing range and you definitely don't want to be anywhere near it. That said, people do try. On the range, there's an old abandoned tank, which people try to visit. There are several stories out there about people that have visited it or have tried to visit it, and some of the tales are as wild as the landscape this all occupies. One thing I found repeated time and time again were mentions of the unexploded mines on the range. That in itself makes it far too dangerous to go to. Others reckon that the range is abandoned as far as firing goes, but don't believe everything you read. The website gov.uk lists its firing days, so trust me, this is still active. Within the training area, there's a designated portion known as the Closed Impact Area. It's bounded to the west by the A53 and to the east by Dry Stones and Morridge. Its southern extent is South Swainsmoor and its northernmost point is North Swainsmoor. The area is fenced off and fully signed, stating there's no entry because of the unexploded ordnance. There is a public footpath that crosses the range, so theoretically you can walk over it, but it's often closed when there's live firing going on. Red flags are raised when shooting is taking place. Do the right thing, people. Don't attempt to visit this area at all. There are plenty of other bits worth exploring on the moorlands, and this isn't one of them. So obviously, being a military area, I won't go anywhere near it. We can skirt the edge of it though by using the A53. This runs alongside the training area whilst connecting Leek to Buxton. The A53 is a modern road, but its route was laid out in the 1760s. As we know already though, there was a route across the moorlands here before then. In the 16th century, the main route from Leek to Buxton went through Upper Hume, crossing the River Churnet just to the south of the hamlet. The first bridge over the river was built in 1587 and its replacement was built in the early 19th century. Today, we know it as Broad's Bridge. From Upper Hume, the early route followed a northwest direction to a gap between Hencloud and the Roaches and on to Flash. The A53, the present Leek to Buxton Road, was built in 1765 as a turnpike following the line of an old Roman road along most of its length. Along the A53 here in Heathylee, there's a house that may well have been stayed in by a member of the royal family in 1745. It's called Royal Cottage and it's had that name since 1833. It's believed that Prince Charles Edward Stuart slept in a house here on his journey through England during the Jacobite Rising of 1745. Whether there was a building on the site of Royal Cottage before the A53 was constructed is not known, and there's no definitive evidence for his presence here in Heathylee. However, it's known for sure that he stayed in Leek on the same journey, so putting two and two together, it seems Royal Cottage might well hold that piece of history after all. Staying on the A53, our next thing to visit is another pub, this time one called the Winking Man. It sits on a junction with a minor road that runs to Longnor. It never used to be a pub. It began its life as a petrol station and a cafe. Stan and Kath Barber bought the place in 1974 and had its pumps removed. They then built a pub called the Moorland Arms. The Barbers stayed here until 1979. They hosted some wonderful evenings, even playing host to the legendary Ken Dodd on one occasion. Now, how this pub gets its modern name is nothing to do with a human being, dead or alive. It's actually to do with something you can see from the A53. You wouldn't have seen this from the direction we've come. The Winking Man is a rock formation that's part of a chain called Ramshaw Rocks, a rocky gritstone escarpment similar to the Roaches. Ramshaw Rocks have plenty of interesting bits, but the easiest to see and most prominent feature is the Winking Man. So much so, the pub named itself in his honour. The Winking Man stands about 10 foot in height, overlooking the Leek to Buxton Road. It resembles a man's face, with a forehead, nose, mouth and chin all easily recognisable. As travellers move along the road, their viewing angle of the rocks changes as they go. As a result of that, the man's eye appears to wink, hence the name. The nose of the Winking Man would have been more pronounced today, but unfortunately it was vandalised in the 1970s, so it's no longer as large as it once was. In the past, the face was regarded as something supernatural and was probably thought to be a god, possibly Thor or Woden. Right, we've got one little section left here in Heathylee. We're on the road here that leads back to Longnor. Now you remember, we saw Longnor on Tuesday this week. We didn't cover all of the village in that episode because part of it actually falls within Heathylee. Let's head up this road and see which bit does. Now we're on the road that links the A53 to Longnor. For the most part, this is almost dead straight and there are very few properties along it. Most of them are holiday lets. It's all laid out in a piecemeal fashion and it stays that way until you reach the river manifold where things start to get a bit more built up again. When we reach the river, we'll be at our final landmark. So this is Longnor Sawmill, another of Heathylee's Grade 2 listed buildings. It's located near the bridge over the River Manifold near Longnor, which defines the parish boundary. It's on the Heathylee side, which is why we didn't cover this earlier in the week. The mill, in its present form, dates from the early 19th century. It sits on the site of an earlier mill built in 1605 by Sir John Harper, which in itself was a replacement for an even earlier mill. That one was on a nearby site, and it was known by 1404 as Frith Mill. Longnor Sawmill has served various purposes throughout its history, including grinding corn, crushing bones, and as a sawmill for the Harper Crewe estate. The sawmill is currently undergoing restoration and rebuilding after being privately purchased. The interior retains features like the cast iron overshot wheel housing and its running gear too. Folks, we have come full circle, almost. After passing over the Manifold, we're in familiar territory, back in Longnor and heading north towards Hollinsclough. We've seen 5 of the 42 parishes in the Staffordshire Moorlands over the past week, and haven't they been lovely? If the other 37 are anything like these, I can't wait to return. And I will, just not this year. Stay tuned though, Staffordshire people. I have more coming your way elsewhere in the county later in 2025. Bye for now. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.